Thank you very much, and I'm very honored to follow such distinguished speakers, to include especially one in a position of command for a great nation that is supporting European security and peace in general. Yes, I am a great theorist. Some people have said that I'm the current Clausewitz, and I find that a bit demeaning. You know, for me, Clausewitz is a precursor. Okay, so this is to give you an idea of how high I am in the hierarchy of thinkers. So my reflection is on land warfare in the 21st century, and what will it look like? My starting point is that warfare in general, the way we are doing it now, the Western way of war, mostly inspired by America, but I'm not saying the American way of war, it's shared, not only through NATO, but let's say the Western way of war is bankrupt. It is strategically bankrupt, and it is morally bankrupt. And this has consequences, and I think that the war we will see in the 21st century will be pretty different from the one we are expecting. Why is it bankrupt? The theory, the idea of standoff warfare and precision strike and joint effect and so on, all that is great, and I'm not saying we should do without it. I am all for it. But the issue is that over the last a few decades, when we liberate a place, in reality we pulverize it. The coalition over Syria has dropped more ordnance than was dropped over Dresden in 1944. And to what effect? Now we have liberated Mosul and Raqqa. Who's going to be able to live in Mosul or Raqqa within the next 20 years? And I'm not talking collateral damage. So we do have an issue with our way of liberating cities. For example, if the Caliphate seized the Ile de la Cité in Paris tonight, I'm convinced that all our allies would tell us, this is Article 5, NATO, we're going to help you liberate Ile de la Cité. And we will say, no, thanks, forget us, we'll do it another way. Because what we agree to do in Mosul or elsewhere, we will not agree to do in Warsaw or Tallinn. And as war is getting closer to our shores, the Western world, we will start realizing that what we accept because it's at a distance and we don't give a damn and they're very different from us, and we will not accept that when it will be our own people or our own neighbors. And I'll take a very good example. I did my best as Vice Chief of Staff SHAPE to use the current exercise, Trident Juncture, the next NRF exercise, to study urban warfare. And Norway had insisted on that exercise being notionally on Norway. So Norway is attacked by its neighbors, so we've renamed Sweden, Finland, and changed the geography, the mapping. But basically, geographically, the threat comes from there. And I insisted on, let's use Oslo. Let's have them conquer half of Oslo so that we can see how we liberate Oslo. And our Norwegian friends said, no, in an exercise, you're not going to fight for Oslo. So the enemy is going to seize part of, 2 or 3 valleys up in the north, so you'll find more bear and moose than population, in essence. We are not willing to look within the NATO construct to the true consequences of battle in towns, and I'll come back to that. Now, it's a moral issue. It's also a strategic issue, and it comes from no boots on the ground. The idea of no boots on the ground, and I'm taking from what you said, strategic effect is when we actually control the population. The rest is sheer destruction. by not committing our own forces, now we do use special forces, but we kind of say they're not there and, forget them. So they are invisible. They are strategically invisible. They achieve strategic effect, but politically they are transparent. And we use proxy, the Kurds, for example. Well, what happens is that who owns the victory? Is it us because we made it possible through precision strike? Or is it the locals because ultimately they are the guys, and women, by the way, who did the battle to actually enter the town? And therefore, the big strategic issue there with the idea of no boots on the ground, and I do not want to commit my soldiers, it is that we may achieve victory, but the peace conditions are not ours. We are not owners of our victory. We achieve it, but we do not own it. So this is why I say that beyond the moral issue, which I believe is a real issue, we do have a strategic issue. We do not own our victories because ultimately the soldier on the ground was not us. And therefore that will have to change. And there's another reason to that, is that war is going to become ever more urban. We all know that 85% of the population soon will be living in towns, many of them in mega cities. Many of them, by the way, within reach of the shore, less than 100 kilometers. Stalingrad is not the name of a potato field, nor is Grozny, nor is Raqqa or Mosul. So we are all training in great areas, Grafenwöhr, Mailly. I mean, if you've ever been to Mailly, I mean, it's a place of utter despair. It's just, okay, open terrain, open field. And that's where we train. Now, we do have village de combat, small facilities for tactical training. But we do not face the consequences of committing an army corps into a city. And yet that is where the fight will happen. So as long as we have our political masters who say no boots on the ground, as long as we are not willing or reluctant to fight our way into towns with our own soldiers and being discriminate in doing that, because a soldier will be more discriminate than a 500-pound bomb in any case, until we are ready to do that, we must prepare to lose the war because we will not even fight the battle. So that's my big concern about 21st century. And therefore, talking more about urban warfare, well, in essence, we've got to unlearn most of what we have learned over the last 50 years. Positively unlearn. For example, massive application of firepower, well, as I've said, morally bankrupt and strategically wrong, I think. Though some application will, of course, help us, and the threat of will help us. Air power. Well, we know now that in a near-peer confrontation, we're going to have contested air. And as you said, Eli, our friends of the Navy and the Air Force are going to spend more time fighting their own battle to make us access the theater than support the land guys in their own battle. What we have learned in Afghanistan was total mastery of the air, zero aerial threat, and it gave a degree of luxury to our soldiers. And the air power we had, not only Air Force, air power, they were jobless if they weren't doing their job helping the land guys. Well, that's got to change, and it's going to go back to when I was a lieutenant, and we were told, there was still a Cold War context, we were told by our Air Force guys that we are going to do battlefield area interdiction, so you won't see us. The tank here, that's your target. We're not going to do anything about it. And yet I remember troops in contact in Afghanistan, there was a massive use of air power. It was indecent. It was completely obscene. I remember reading reports every day. We were engaged by 1 to 2 AK-47s. I remember the figure because I know what 1 AK and 2 AKs are, but 1 to 2, 1.4, I don't know. And then you read the list of what happened. So an Apache came and delivered this, and there was B-1, so you had 4 GBU-38s, and then, it was massive. 8 tons to get rid of 1 to 2 AK-47s. Well, that's not going to happen. It's morally bankrupt, and it's not going to happen. End of story. So all our soldiers who've come back from that experience, whenever you have an issue, you call in air, forget it. which leads me back to the autonomy, Eli, that you mentioned. Give us back our mortars and air defense to a certain degree, blah, blah, blah. And also, in an urban environment, we will have a massive issue of force ratio, of numbers, sheer numbers. We have become small armies. Even the American army believes it's a small army. Now all the other ones look at it and go, we'd like to be that small. But yes, we are small. But even if we were the Chinese, we would be small in relation with the population. Even the Chinese army would have a big problem in Kinshasa. And therefore, the issue becomes, how do we enhance our soldiers? How do we, admitting that we're going to have to commit them again, just like we saw American soldiers in Saint-Lô, during the Normandy campaign, and we did fight for cities during the Second World War, and the Soviets did it big way. I mean, it ended in Berlin with a massive assault. Street to street, house to house fighting. Well, once we'll be into that, we need to think of a robotic environment, an ecosystem to help our soldiers. Now, I happen to be in industry just to do that, but it's not a pitch for my own job. It's the idea is we need to think of not robotization of the battlefield in the sense that we will replace the soldiers that we don't want to commit with robots that we're quite willing to commit. It's not that. It's our soldiers will go into battle, but they need an environment that will increase their situational awareness, help them in sustainment, do part of combat for them, to include high precision combat, because there's a degree to which at which the soldier can't assume precision, and just help us help the odds on our side, but we will take casualties. So to conclude, I'm pretty sad about this conclusion, and I'm very sorry I've left the service before I'll have time to test my own ideas. But I believe war as we think it's happened over the last 30 years, morally bankrupt, strategically bankrupt. We're going into urban operations big way, almost forget potato fields, and go back into close combat, accept close combat, accept the casualties. It's the only way for us to own the victories that we will pay for. Thank you for your attention.